Welcome to Roots and Roofs, where we explore the intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship in the real estate world. I am your host, Mackenzie Shelton. Join us as we dive into the unique journey of balancing family life with owning a thriving real estate business. Each episode, we will uncover inspiring stories, practical tips, mindset conversations, and expert insights from others who are carving their paths in the real estate industry. Whether you are a seasoned realtor, a prospective buyer, or simply curious about the dynamics of managing both home and career, Roots and Roofs is your go-to podcast for heartfelt discussions and invaluable advice. Tune in and discover how these incredible women are building deep roots from the ground up while nurturing their families under the same roof. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Roots and Roofs. I have a very exciting guest with me today. Carole Evans is here, and I am going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Mackenzie, for having me. I am honored to be here with you today. My name is Carole Evans. I live in East Tennessee, and I serve as the Director of Support for a cell phone retailer. We are one of Verizon's largest retailers, and I'm privileged to be a Director of Support over a team that does all of the technical support, both hands-on and remote support for all of our retail locations around the country. And when I'm not working, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I also have a podcast and love to speak and write when I have a chance about things that I'm passionate about. And I'm really passionate about helping people really build their careers and their families on the foundation of their faith. And that's really important to me. And so we all have the opportunity to serve people in different types of careers. And when we look at those jobs and those opportunities as a way to give back to the people in our community, what we do in the 9 to 5 just becomes so much more rich and full. And it's a privilege to do that.
Oh, I'm really excited to kind of ask you some questions around this.
Yeah.
So I know that this has been kind of a journey for you.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of just explain to me a little bit more of like what brought you to the place of realizing that, you know, leaning into your faith and things was actually
Mm-hmm.
going to help you with your career? Because I know it has
Yeah.
been a little bit of a journey for you.
Yeah, it definitely has been. There was many years when I didn't look at it like that. And I felt like my career was something that I was really, really proud of. And the accomplishments were something that I was proud of. And it's not wrong to be proud of the accomplishments. And not wrong to do that. But when we start building our identity and our identity gets wrapped up in our success, we are really building on some shaky ground. Because what happens when we don't have success and then our identity just crumbles? And really how it all started to shift and change for me was, I talked to before about building our career and our home on the foundation of our faith. And for me, my faith has been something that I've always had. And sometimes in different seasons of life, it's kind of sat in my back pocket. And there was a season in my life when my home foundation was pretty rocky. And it wasn't rocky because anything major happened. There was no big blow up or big mistake or anything that's drama worthy. It was really just investing a lot of time in my career and then not investing enough time in my faith or my family. And being a mom is hard, and being a wife is hard. And sometimes it's not as glamorous. I would say most of the time, actually, it's not as glamorous as our jobs and our career. And when you work really hard in your job, in your field, people pat you on the back and they say things like, "Thank you so much. Good work. You're a great leader." Or, "I appreciate how much you've invested in me." Or, "Look at your team's doing this," or, "Look at this project your team did." And when you go home, there is still laundry and there are still yards that need to be mowed. And you still have the weed eating, and there's still the milkshake that gets spilled in the back seat. And there's still all the things that happen. And, the kids don't exactly, we're not in the pat mom on the back sort of a stage of life where they're like, "Look at all the work you've done, mom." We're just not there. Eli is just about to be 7 and Jackson just turned 10. And when I was going through this particular season of life, Eli was about 6 months old, between 6 months and a year old, and it was a really, really hard season. I couldn't leave the room without him screaming and crying, and it was just really hard. And so my marriage really started to suffer, and I didn't lose my marriage, but I almost did. And I was at a gas station doing a Facebook Marketplace drop off one day, and I I noticed I would call myself an inquisitive person. My husband might say I'm nosy, but I would say inquisitive. um, but I was watching this dad and his little boy in the car right beside me, and it became obvious after a few minutes that they were there to do a drop off, like a parent swap drop off. And the mom came up in a minivan, and the little boy refused to get out of the dad's truck, and he screamed and he cried and he put his arms out so he couldn't get out of the truck. And I just started to cry. And I thought, Carole, if you don't get a hold of yourself and you don't get a hold of your marriage, this is going to be you. You're going to be doing kid drop offs in the parking lot of a gas station if you're not really careful. And it's really easy for our ego to kind of sit on one shoulder and say, like, you know what, your husband should do this, or you know what, blah blah blah, or we can blame stuff on anybody. And on our job, our schedule, our parents, our husband, our spouse. It doesn't matter. We can blame any number of things. And that was kind of my wake up call to say, okay, you've invested a lot in your career. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I went to conferences, I did everything to grow my career because it was feeding me. It fed my ego, it fed my success, it fed the bank account. It was feeding me in so many things. And so I just kept feeding it back because it felt really good. And so I stopped for a second. I said, okay, if I don't want this to be me, I'm going to have to change some things. And I really started to pour back into myself spiritually and pour back into my family and start reading some books about marriage and start reading some books about parenting. Like if parenting is hard and stressful, why am I not pouring into this part of my life? I'm pouring into my work part, but I'm not pouring into anything else. And so that was the initial shift for me where I just kind of had that wake up call and saying, I've got to change something. And so really for the last 6 years, it's been that drive back. I was kind of anemic in certain areas of my life and really started to pour back into myself in different areas. And then the more I learned, the more passionate I became about helping people that I know are still stuck there. And if we're not careful, any of us can revert back to it really quickly. And so it just became a passion of mine to keep talking about it.
Oh, that was so good. I feel like all of my listeners are just really, really gonna appreciate that a lot. Um, it's interesting that you had such an opportunity to like be reflective on that
Yeah.
because I think sometimes it's very easy when we are in the thick of things, especially like rearing young children
Yeah.
and not getting sleep and
Hmm.
also working and all of these things. It's very
Yeah.
easy to just continue to blame,
Hmm.
like you said, everything else and all of our circumstances,
Yeah.
and and not take a moment to reflect, because a lot of
Hmm.
times we don't have that moment.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
to kind of add to, I know you said that you took the opportunity to focus more on growth in,
Hmm.
your marriage and parenting and things like
Yeah.
that. What were some of the things that, you and your husband did together that
Yeah.
kind of helped, change your dynamic in your relationship and things like that?
Yeah. We did a couple of things that were just practical things that helped. We started planning date nights for each other. Um, and that really, I think I needed that more than I realized I did. We were talking about date nights, and he said, well, usually you plan the date nights. And I said, I know, but I would love for you to do that too sometimes. So it's not just me. And I said something that probably wasn't in the best attitude. If I had looking back on it, may not have been the best. But he said, I don't know about the babysitters and what restaurant we're going to go to, what we're going to do. And I said, if you can check the generating schedule to see if you can go fishing on Saturday morning, I think you can plan a date night. And if you can check the hunting season, and if you can check all the things that you do for all of your guy hobbies, I feel like you can plan a date night. And he said, you know what? You're right. I can. And so that was kind of a moment that we needed to like, okay, that might be an accurate point. And so we needed kind of that moment. I needed to know that he was going to invest in us. And I needed to invest in us, but I wanted to know that he could do it too and that he wanted to do it. And he did, even if it didn't always come naturally for him to do that kind of stuff, he tried. And I think I really appreciated the effort. So we started planning date nights for each other. So I planned, we love trying different restaurants that are local, like just different types of unique restaurants and food types. And so we looked up different restaurants that I thought he would like. And then I planned a date night where we would go axe throwing, and he loved that. And then the next month, he planned a date night for me where we went to a different restaurant and we went to do a pottery class together. That was so fun. So we started doing things with the other person in mind. And that became really important. And then we just started adding that time together into our budget. We started budgeting for babysitters. We started budgeting that time, putting it on the calendar months in advance instead of doing it when we needed it or when we felt like we were butting heads again. Um, we didn't wait until we needed it to plan it. We just started planning it out like further in advance and putting that time on the calendar, putting those dollars in our budget. We read a book together that really helped. And just the fact that we would read it separately and then talk about it together. And that really just
What
helped
what's the
to.
yeah, what's the book?
The book was called The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. And
Hmm.
that really helped a lot. And I think honestly, the book was great. I highly recommend it. But any book I think would be great to know that you can commit to reading something together and then talking about how it impacted you. And one of the takeaways from the book that we got a lot out of it really, really resonated with me was this idea of loving our spouse through their changes. And sometimes we say things like, oh, my spouse has changed. Well, no kidding. Like, they're going to change, like I'm going to change. He's going to change. Together as a couple, our marriage looks different than it did when we got married 15 and a half years ago. It's going to look different. And over time, how we spend time together looks different now as parents. Now, as parents, having a home date where the grandparents keep the kids or somebody keeps the kids and we stay at home and watch a movie and order in, that is amazing. 10 years ago, I'd have been like, man, that's kind of boring. Now I'm like, man, that's so nice to be able to do that. And, or if the grandparents keep the kids overnight and we just stay home and sleep in the next day, that's wonderful. Like, I love that. And we're going to change. And I think giving your spouse the space to change and also giving them the room to figure out who they are in this next phase of life. Because sometimes it's kind of messy while we're figuring out who we are in the next phase of life and giving them the space to be human and not expecting perfection out of them. We're not perfect. They're not perfect. And that those things really helped us a lot to try to just sit back a little bit more, love each other through those changes. And I would also say that I was feeling that tug away more deeply than he was, and he had no idea how much I felt that. And I listened to this online YouTube series called Vertical Marriage by Dave and Ann Wilson. And one of the things they recommended was rating your marriage with your spouse. And so one day we did that. And so I just said, if you could rate our marriage on like a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, how would you rate it? And he knew we were kind of struggling and just had some tension, but he didn't know how bad it was. And I think he said like a 5, and I said 2. And he was like, "Oh,
Oh,
two is bad." Like that's how I feel. I felt like I was at a 2. And I think that was the wake up call he needed to know how hard it was for me because he wasn't feeling like it was that bad. He just thought, well, we're having a tough season, we'll get through it. And I was feeling like this is a really hard season. And I was already thinking like, you know what? I bet I could do this on my own. I bet I
Okay,
could
so
do it.
can I so can I interrupt you
Yeah,
and ask you, this is going to be a really blunt question,
it's okay.
mostly because this is what I hear from
Hmm.
friends of mine,
Yeah,
other women who have gotten divorced,
yeah.
is they are working
Hmm.
and they are coming home and they are doing all the childcare.
Mm,
They are doing all of the housework.
yeah,
So was your life feeling a little bit like that also at that time?
somewhat. But my husband came home first from school, so he was a teacher. So he did dinner a lot. He cooked dinner a lot, and he took care of the kids a lot. So I would drop my youngest son Eli off for childcare in the morning. He would pick him up in the afternoon. So there was some things that I felt a heavier burden on, like the laundry, the house cleaning. He didn't really particularly help with those things. He helped with cooking and he helped with childcare. So we really had to kind of sit down and talk through all of that because even though he helped with childcare and he helped with cooking, if I was late for dinner, he would get upset. And I was like, well, I'm working a corporate job and I work 40 minutes away from the house, you know? And so then it was immediately I would walk in the door and he would be upset because he had had the kids and they were rough because you had a 3-year-old and a 6-month old and dinner was ready. And so in some ways we had a role reversal, but in other ways I felt like I'm working this corporate job. This is through the COVID time period. And I've got this and I've got this. And I still felt like my plate was more full. I felt like my plate was heavier. And we had to really sit down and talk through that of what that meant for me because it was, at that age too, kids go through so much laundry and there's constantly stuff to do. And we have dogs, we live in the country, the house was always dirty. And so we had to really sit down and talk about like me being home for dinner on time. And I could have put forth more of an effort to leave the office earlier if I really wanted to. And so when we started shifting some things, I started making an effort to be home on time and be home earlier and he started making an effort to really help more around the house with different things. And before he would sit down to, watch a movie or watch the news or whatever, he would say, "Is there anything else I can help with?" Instead of me uh, stomping through the house and slamming doors to hopefully drop enough hints that I still needed help. Because I didn't want to ask, I wanted him to just know that I still needed help, and he didn't always know. And in his mind, he's like, "Well, I made dinner. That's good,
Mm,
right?" Well, that's good, but the work's not done. We're parents. We have a lot more work to do before we can put our feet up. And I think that I was dropping a lot of hints, hoping he would notice how hard I was working and what else needed to be done. And he didn't always naturally look around. Again, he looked around the house. The house was good enough. And I'm like, the house is a hot mess. Like we got to work on this. And so anyway, we really had to stop assuming the other one knew. And we really had to get a little bit more organized with what my expectations were and what his expectations were. We had a lot of unspoken expectations that we had to verbalize with each other. And then in those unspoken expectations, we attached a lot of meaning to that. Like,
mm.
you don't help with this, therefore you don't care. Or you've not done this, therefore I don't care, or whatever. And so we had to really verbalize and say the hard things out loud that are really
Oh,
uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. My husband and I have been through like various stages of this,
Yeah.
and we both, in kind of a little bit of a tough period, read the book Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs.
Mm.
Um, have you ever read that one?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I've not read that
Yeah.
one.
So definitely a religious aspect. So, for my
Yeah.
listeners, like it is a very faith-based
Hmm.
book. But during that period of time, like, we were struggling a lot with like the communication aspect of things. And the biggest thing that my husband would say to me all the time is, I don't like the way that you're speaking to me. Like, I don't like your tone and things like that. And I'm like, well, how else am I supposed to talk to you if I'm frustrated or if I'm angry or if I'm annoyed, or things like that. And it's just like all of those like so simple, finite like
Yeah.
communication things that
Hmm.
I really do think, I mean, yes, there are people out there that have massive problems in their marriage that they may or
Yeah.
may not overcome and things like that. But to your point, it's not always like this one big thing.
Yeah.
It's all of these tiny,
Hmm.
tiny little things that unfortunately at the end of the day add up,
Yeah.
and you kind of go, do I really want to keep doing this? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I think we ignore them for a long time because they are so small. And so we
Yeah.
think like, I'll just let that go. And then we don't address it for like a few months. And then like a season, like just the summer or just the winter or just the hard spring season or whatever. And then it just builds up until that just becomes the norm. And then it's a real big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's kind of shift gears here because we
Yeah.
are getting a little short on time here. So what are some things that you are doing with your team, in your career that you think is with all of the things that you have now learned
Hmm.
in your own personal life? Like, what are some concrete things that you're helping your team with to kind of just help them with their personal lives?
Yeah. One thing as a leader to really watch out for, there's a couple of tells that all of us have when we are doing well or not doing well, with our work-life balance, or even with attaching our identity, attaching some emotion to it. I think as a leader, something we can always do is encourage people to take time off, to take some mental health days, and not to wait until they're burnout before they rest. If they're going through a season where they're kind of on that edge of they're just about there, go ahead and encourage them to unplug. I like to watch people's, and I'm bad about this too, and then they hold me accountable to it, but really watching their PTO. When their PTO starts climbing and they're getting all this PTO built up and they're not using it, and it's like, okay, I want to know what week you're going to take off in the next 2 months, and go ahead and tell me how are you going to spend time with your family? And I'll check in with them, the people that I know of that have told me about their families, and a lot of them do, and I'll say, hey, how's your wife doing? How's your husband doing? How's the garden? And we just check in on those things because they're important and they're part of their identity. They're part of who they are. And so we'll talk about them. We talk about them in their one-on-ones. We talk about them in their life updates, and just checking in with people to make sure they understand. Mary Kay Ash said in her book, in her autobiography, you make important what you pay attention to. And I
Mm.
said that a lot for people at work, but I didn't always practice it in my own life. And so when I started practicing it in my own life, it made me really aware of, as a boss, what areas am I paying attention to in my team members' life? And am I also encouraging them to set healthy boundaries? And work is important. Work is not everything. Work is not life. And so really encouraging them to do the same thing when we see some trends with people. We don't need to get all up in their business, but we can say like, hey, if you need to take a day, I know you've got a lot going on right now. Why don't you take the rest of the day and just go be with your kid, or go do what you need to do? Go sit at the hospital with your parent, or go do what you need to do, whatever it is that's important in their life, of giving them the space that they need to handle that.
Yeah, and giving them the permission to not feel guilty about it, right?
Yeah, right.
I think it's so easy, even in my profession where we're real estate agents, and
Yeah.
they have the ability to create their own schedule and things like that,
Mhm.
and yet it is so easy to go, yeah, I need to take a day and, not worry
Mhm.
about all of my clients and things like that. But now I feel bad because I didn't actually work today,
Yeah.
and all of those kind of things. And it's like, it's almost as leaders, like we sometimes just have to give people permission to like not feel bad about that.
Yeah. Right. Right. That's really
So,
important.
yeah, absolutely. So, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to a young mom who is really, really trying to grow her career in whatever profession it is, and is also trying to manage all of the things that she has
Mhm.
going on in her life. Like, what would be that one piece of advice that you would give to somebody?
Mm. I would say that balance is a myth, that there is
Mm,
never perfect balance in everything. And if we are striving for perfect balance, we will forever be disappointed. And I would encourage her to wherever she is, be all there. If you're at your kid's baseball game, be there. Don't check your email 50 times. Don't, because even if you get an email, what are you going to do? You can't handle it. So just don't check it, and don't check it unless you're at a place to actually do something about it. And so if you're on a date night, go be on the date night. Just go do it. And if you're at work, then 100% commit. You're there until 5 o'clock, commit, be at work. Now, there are times when we get phone calls from the school or a call from the sitter that someone's thrown up and you have to go deal with that. But wherever you are, enjoy that moment that you have that God's given you. And sometimes I'm really guilty. I want to know the plan for the week and the month and the quarter. I would love to know by the year. And if it could be in a color coded chart, that'd be even better. And life didn't work like that. It just doesn't. And so someone told me to really think about the next 20 minutes at a time. And in 20-minute increments, just be there, do what you can do for the next 20 minutes. And sometimes that's all the capacity we have, is just being where we're going to be for the next 20 minutes and enjoy the moment. Even if it's hard, find something that you can be thankful for in that moment, but commit to being wherever you're at and just commit to enjoying that moment. And don't try to strive for perfect balance, because it's a total myth. It's just not,
yeah.
it's not always 50-50. It's not 50-50 with your work and your personal life. It's not 50-50 in marriage. It's not 50-50 with your kids. Your kids are not at a place to actually help right now, probably. Or if they are, you have to go back and clean it up after, because it's kind of messy when they try to help. And so it's not always, life is not 50-50, but I can enjoy the moment where I am right now.
You want to know what? I honestly needed that advice because I've had a tough few days. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for just sharing your story and being
Yeah.
vulnerable. And I know that so many of my listeners are going to relate to this, because we've all been in that stage
Yeah.
at one point in time.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for imparting all
Yes.
of your wisdom. Um, is there anywhere that you would like people to follow you very specifically? We'll make sure to put it in the show
Sure.
notes.
Sure. I have a podcast called Faith and Work if they're interested in following along with that. I also have a newsletter on LinkedIn that really talks about tying in our home life and our work life all together and how we can do that. And so if people are interested in following along with that newsletter, that is available on LinkedIn once a month.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Thank you, Carole, so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to Roots and Roofs podcast today. If you loved today's episode, please let me know. I love hearing from you on Instagram and Facebook, so feel free to send me a DM or tag me in your stories so I can share it too. If you're looking for more information about today's topic, please visit my website, mahoganyacres.com, and all of the information that is listed in the show notes below. Until next time.